So as you can see there, a lot of tear down has been going on our Trans Am. We're disassembling everything, getting it ready to paint. So everything has to come back off of the chassis, everything has to come back off the engine. We'll be painting the engine block, the transmission, all the chassis, suspension components, everything. We've also going back in on the firewall. We've had a couple of little holes that we've got to weld up. You can see we've got stuff marked here, little things that we've been welding. And just kind of doing all of our final assembly type stuff there, making sure everything is dialed in exactly where we want it. We've also went back in and we've made some marks on the chassis for our ground straps. So we've got a drill and tap a couple of spots there on the frame as we disassemble it. And then on our steering, we do have our steering hooked up. We did do a brand new steering column from Flaming River. And we've got all of our joints and stuff set up here going down to our steering rack. And as we disassemble this, we do have a little bit more welding. We had to make a bracket here to put a heim joint to kind of stabilize all of our steering shafts there. So we'll finish welding that up when we disassemble the frame. Moving on over to the body. We're going to take the body off the chassis when we paint this thing. We'll mount it back onto the rotisserie, and we'll do an undercoating on the bottom side of the floor. We'll seam seal everything, do a Raptor liner there, and then when we get the chassis painted, we'll reassemble everything, and then we'll do our final body work at that point. Wheels and tires. So we did get all of our wheels and tires ordered. We got our tires in. Wheels are ordered. Now we ended up doing a 18-12 on the rear and an 18x9 on the front. So we went with the Continental Extreme Contact tires. Really good tire. This is a overall this is a 13.5-inch tire there from Continental. It's a 335/30 on the rear, so a pretty good size meaty tire. And we do have the one on the driver's side mounted up on our fitment tool just to double check all of our back spacing when we ordered the wheels. And as you can see there, it's a pretty good sized tire, but we do have clearance on everything, and then everything flushes up with the body here. So once we get weight and stuff back on the car, it obviously close up the gaps and stuff there on everything, and it'll look really, really good. So a lot of tire back here on the back of this car. The rear of this car is definitely going to be the look. You can see there the difference between the tire there and then the factory 10-inch tire here on the passenger side. So a lot of difference there. Pretty excited about that. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and finish disassembling the car. We're going to go ahead and take the exhaust system out, start dropping the fuel tank, getting everything ready to where we can take the body back off of the chassis, and then get this thing ready to where we can get the chassis painted. So there it is, the body is back off the chassis one more time, and we're getting ready to completely disassemble the chassis here, as I stated earlier. When I say completely disassemble it, every nut, bolt, bracket, brake line, everything's coming off of it and being prepped for paint so we can reassemble it. The engine and transmission will be painted. Everything's got to come off. It's just part of the process. It'll be really, really detailed. We can detail some things while we've got it apart. And while we're working on that, we're also going to do some work on our body to finish it up. As I stated earlier, there's a couple of things here that we've kind of finished up that we've got to do. We got to weld up some holes here for a bracket on the inside. We're going to fill in. This is the original hole for the accelerator cable, but being as we're doing a drive-by wire, we left that. Not sure if we was going to use it, but we're going to fill that hole in as well. And then just kind of clean up some things here that where we had to cut and modify underneath the body. There's a couple of brackets here that we've got to remove off the bottom of the body, and just some finish welding and just little odd and end things here that we've got to do to get it prepped for the Raptor liner on the bottom side of the body. So a lot of work to do. We're excited though. To me, this is the fun part of the process. This is, we've got to build it, so to speak. We've seen it all together, what it's going to look like. Now we get to start tearing it apart and really dialing it in and making it look pretty. And that's the thing with me. I'm a very visual guy. So making it, getting this rolling chassis back together with everything all painted, man, just looks like a piece of artwork. That's what I'm excited for. So. A lot of tear down to do, and lots of little odd and end, little small parts and pieces to prep and get painted. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us. So let's dive back in and get back after it. So now that we've got everything tore apart on our suspension on the Trans Am, we've got it moved over here to the work table. We've got our upper and lower control arms here, all of our 4-link bars, our track bar from the rear suspension, and now we need to further tear everything down as far as getting our bushings in that out, disassembling anything that we want to take off of this thing to get it ready to paint. So what we've done, you kind of see me in there in the video. I know it was sped up, but we've bagged and labeled every single part that come off of it, where it went, and all the hardware for that particular item. So when we go back in and tear these down, we'll do it the same way. We'll bag every single, the bushings up for the upper control arm. We'll bag those, put them in a separate bag, label it, and have it ready to go when we go back and put it together. Now, speaking of putting it back together, we don't have to be just super careful, because we do have the really nice book here from the Roadster Shop. And this book here gives you the really detailed instructions of how everything is assembled, gives you your specs, what hardware you're supposed to do, what order that everything is supposed to be assembled in. Even gives us the links for our 4-link bars here on the back, so it'd be really easy to reassemble. Now, our upper 4-link bars here, now these are a really nice aluminized piece that the Roadster Shop makes, and they have a gray coating on them that I really like. It seems to hold up pretty well, so we're probably going to just leave those alone, and everything else we'll go back in, disassemble, and we'll paint it all the black that we're going to paint on the chassis. So we're going to go ahead and jump in here and start tearing all this down, getting it labeled up, and getting all these parts ready for paint. So yesterday we had a really busy day. You seen us there. We got everything tore apart on our 4-link bars, our upper and lower control arms, everything disassembled on the chassis. So what you didn't see is we went ahead and mounted the body to the rotisserie. We've got everything moved over into our body shop. So I'm going to get the camera turned around here and I'll show you what we've got. So again, body mounted to the rotisserie, moved over to the body shop. Our chassis is over here, set up, ready to go, so we can do all of our prep work and get everything ready to paint. Now again, we do have some finished work to do on the body itself. There's a couple of brackets that we're going to kind of remove off the body there, a little bit of welding to do, and we'll get everything prepped for seam sealer and any kind of primers that we need to put back in. And then we'll do our undercoating on the bottom of the floor. While we're over here, we're going to go ahead and finish prepping the firewall. The firewall will be painted when it leaves over here. So once we set it back down on the chassis, everything's painted. We have our motor and transmission to paint. We have everything on the chassis. It's a lot of little small parts to paint. We have our bumpers, all of our core supports, all of our various bracketry and stuff under the hood that we have to get painted. And then there is all of our 4-link, our sway bars, any kind of brackets that goes to the frame rail. So as you can see, a lot of work to do here. Oh, and we also have our inner fenders over there that we have to do body work on and get those prepped and painted as well. So everything on the bottom of the floors, the inside of the inner fenders is all going to be black Raptor liner. And after we do all of our seam sealing and stuff there, that's going to look really good. It's going to give us a layer of protection there underneath the body, because we will drive this car. And it'll be a nice contrast there between the satin black chassis paint that we've got here for the chassis, and then everything is going to look really good. So as you can see here, we have a lot of prep work to do, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I think we're going to go ahead and start on the bottom of the body there first. A little bit of cutting and welding to do there, so we're going to go ahead and knock that out. We have to finish up our bracket here for our heim joint on the steering shaft on the chassis, so we'll finish that up, and then we'll remove the cross member here for the transmission. It's really the only thing left we have to do to the chassis, and it's ready to start wiping down, getting it all sanded and ready for paint. So Again, lots of work to do. Not really sure the exact order everything's going to be painted, but it's all got to be painted, so that really doesn't matter. So we're going to get after it. So moving over to some of our suspension parts, we're getting ready to paint. We've got these laid out on a table. One of the first things that we need to do is clean all of our parts really well with a grease and wax remover. Now we're using Tenco's HR 397. This is a really good, strong grease and wax remover. So we're going to take a little of that, put it on a paper towel, and make sure that we clean everything really well. And as you can see, just what kind of dirt and grime is there on the pipe. We don't want to get all that off before we go to sanding it. So we're going to do that with all of our parts. Then we're going to sand them and get them ready to hang up in the paint booth, and we'll get some epoxy primer put on them. So we're going to go through here, clean everything really well. Again, you can see what kind of stuff is coming off there. Really want to spend time to make sure there's no grease around our bushing points up here on this. So make sure we get inside there really well, all the way through, get all of our threads. Now we will tape our threads up because we don't want to get paint and primer onto the threads. So we're going to go ahead and get the rest of this cleaned up, and we'll be back with you in just a minute. So now that we've got our parts cleaned with our grease and wax remover, we're going to take a piece of 180 grit sandpaper. Now this is just a piece of file paper that we would normally use on some of our sanding blocks. We're just going to take that and fold it in half, so we've got adhesive on or sanding paper on both sides. So I'm going to start with our 4-link bars. We're basically just going to take that, wrap it around here, and make sure that we get those cleaned up really well, sand them down, get a good scratch put in them, and everything that we can with our sandpaper. It's not going to take a whole lot here. We just want to put a little bit of scratch down into the metal, and then our epoxy will bite down into that. So we want to make sure we get it really, really well all the way around. Make sure we get our end up here with our bushing on it, get it good. And we're going to go ahead and sand the rest of those down. Now we're also going to take a red Scotch-Brite once we get the rest of this sanded, and we'll go around and make sure that we get around any of our welds really well. Make sure everything is sanded and has a good mechanical bite when we go back in and do our primer. Same thing here with this end where the welds are. Make sure that we get down in here. Everything's sanded really well. Paint work is all in the prep. The more time you spend prepping, the better your paint job will turn out. Just going to make sure we get everything sanded really well. You can see there just how much nicer that's looking. A little bit more up here. Everything there is looking really good. So we've got to get all of our parts pretty much looking like this, and then we'll be ready to get some epoxy on it. So let's go ahead, we'll get the rest of these parts prepped, and we'll be right back. So now that we've got everything sanded and prepped, we're going ahead and hanging all of our parts up and getting them ready to paint. Now we're just hanging them from a rack here that'll hold everything while we paint. And as you can see here on our control arms, we've taped up our ball joint on both sides here so no paint gets in there. So we're just going to get these pulled up here, tied up so they're nice and sturdy. This is just a piece of wire that we use off of a rack to hang all of our parts and stuff up with. And then we'll get everything ready to paint. So now we have all of our parts that we're going to get painted here today. We've got those hanging up after we've got them sanded. And so now we're getting ready to put some epoxy primer on that, on everything that we've got here. And we're going to do this in shifts. This is a lot of parts and pieces to paint. So talking about our epoxy, we're going to use, again, sticking with our Tamco, we're using Tamco 662 black epoxy, then the activator there. And I'm also going to insert a picture here. All the paint and materials that we're going to be using for this car come from Tamco. So we're going to go ahead, this is mixed up at a 1-to-1 ratio. So we're going to go ahead and get us some of this mixed up here, and we'll do a final wipe down on our parts, and we'll get them sprayed with some epoxy. Now, one of the last things that we need to do now that we've got our primer mixed up is we need to do a final wipe down here, and we're going to use Tamco's HR398 final wipe. And this is just going to make sure that it gets any last little bit of residue or oils off of our hands that might have been on the parts after we sanded them, any kind of sanding residue, just making sure that they're really clean. It also helps to cut down on some of the static. So we will make sure that the parts are really good and clean before we put any kind of primer on them. So we'll give this all a really good wipe down on all of our parts and pieces. And then we've got our primer already mixed up, and we'll be ready to spray. So one of the things that you might ask yourself too is like, why are you painting all of this and not having it powder coated? Well, I personally have just not ever had that good of luck with powder coat. Maybe your experience has been different. I just know as a painter, I can make my paint stick. And if I send these parts out to have them outsourced, have it powder coated out of the shop, I don't really know their processes. I don't know if, you know, what their prep is. And I've just had some durability issues in the past with parts that we've had sent out to have powder coated. So we just use now, if we're able, we just paint it. So now that we've got all of our parts sanded down, we've got them wiped down, we've got them taped up, hanging up, we've got our primer mixed up in the gun, ready to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the primer sprayed, and unfortunately I'm gonna move the camera out just to keep overspray off of it. So as soon as I get some primer on there, I'll bring it back in and we'll let you see what that looks like. So I was able to get the epoxy primer sprayed, and it's had a little bit of time to flash off. And so now we're gonna go back in and we're gonna get our paint mixed up and talk about our paint and what we're gonna be using to top coat this. And you see here, everything's got a nice coat of black epoxy primer. So let's move over into the mixing room and we'll talk about what we're going to use. So for this instance, we're going to use Tamco's chassis black. This is a DTM 2K 4:1 with the hardener. Now again, guys, I'm not sponsored by Tamco, but as you can see, we use a lot of their products. We've also got some PPG stuff in there we're using on another project. Just a little bit of everything, stuff we've used in the past, just for whatever purpose. But Tamco, really good products. We stand behind them. We've been using them now for probably a good, I don't know, 9-10 years, something like that. Good products, good customer service. We've had no issues with them. Again, this mix is 4:1, so just like the epoxy, we're going to go ahead, we're going to get it mixed up and put it in a cup, and we'll get to spraying. So now we've got everything mixed up on our paint. This is the chassis black. It's like a single stage, so it's going to dry more of a satin to a semi-gloss finish. And so I'm going to go ahead and finish this video up here. I'm going to go ahead and spray the paint on the parts in here that's in the booth, all of our control arms and various odd end brackets that we've got. But when I show you after I paint it, the paint's still going to look wet, which is going to be wet. So just keep in mind that it will dry down to more of a semi-gloss or a satin finish. So when we pick back up next video, I'll be sure to show you these parts when they'll be completely dry over the weekend. So we'll come back in next week and I'll show you those. And then we'll continue getting the floor pans on the bottom of the car, getting those prepped for undercoating. And then we'll be getting our chassis. We'll be sanding on it and getting it ready for paint as well. So lots to do, and man, I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Have a great weekend. Sorry if this took so long to get an update in. We have been super busy. I had an update around the 4th of July that talked about what all we had going on. So you can go back in and check that out. But super busy here at the shop. I hadn't forgot about you. We have been making progress on this car, as you can see. We just hadn't been able to film a lot of it. So be sure to like and subscribe to our videos. If you haven't subscribed, keep up with all the latest content that we've got coming out. Lots more to do on this car. See you next time.